The latest athletic player survey reassures the Panthers' great reputation across the NHL.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, February 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. You can follow the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And if you are on the YouTube channel, make sure to press that like button down below. Shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase, and you can do that all on Gametime. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. Today, we are going to discuss the athletic players survey, what it says really about the Florida Panthers. We're going to discuss if players are going to, in fact, take it easy during the Four Nations face-off, which is 6 days away from now at the start of it. And then we're going to preview tonight's game between the Panthers and the St. Louis Blues from the Enterprise Center tonight at 8 p.m. So every year we see these player surveys come out and want to discuss more about what it means for the Florida Panthers, where they stand, and beyond. So let's discuss with the first question that was asked on this survey is like, if you have a no trade list, what is the first team on it? And just under 49% said the Winnipeg Jets are the team on their no trade list. Along with that are the Buffalo Sabres, San Jose Sharks, Calgary Flames, Senators, Ducks, New York Rangers below them. And it's a mix of a lot of teams that haven't won and taxes. And crazy to think that the Winnipeg Jets are a team that continues to win, but still have a lot of players have them on their no trade list for them. And really, it really comes down to just the brutal winters for them. What there is to do around the city, small market, and really that really has a lot to do with players not wanting to go there. So that's a market that really has to build through the draft and trades of players who don't have them on their clauses, or overpay players for that in order to attract guys there. And really, we've seen what happens when small markets don't have really a lot around them, and lifestyle matters for these NHL players off the ice about raising families and everything. And I think more about that along with the taxes for teams that are not winning, and really in the mid 90s, when you think about Quebec and not getting through just yet, and then a small market there, and for them, a mostly French speaking city, and the players who don't speak the language have a hard time getting in with the lifestyle there. It's I think more and more thinking about that, even though the Ottawa Senators got a little bit in trouble with their fan base about a little bit of a connection between Ottawa and Quebec City with the arena questions still there for them. It doesn't give me any confidence that the NHL is in fact going to go back to Quebec City. And not a single anonymous player on this survey of 82 responses put the Florida Panthers there for the top of their no trade list. Hey, helps when you win, and helps when you have palm trees and no taxes there. That's another. That's what was the statement that Kevin Adams of the Buffalo Sabres put out there. Which is the coach that you would like to play for other than your own? So Paul Maurice was second on this list, right behind John Cooper. Paul Maurice had 13.21%. John Cooper had 24%, just under there. And just it comes down to being relatable for the players and guys across the media as well. And we've seen the funny quotes from Paul Maurice about calling Barkov a goon, humble in defeat even after the 2023 final. The quote, I'm gonna alter this because it's a family-friendly show. Breathe through your nose, not your butthole. That he said around there, joking around how the ink not being dry yet after signing his most recent extension with the team after the team lost as well. So that's another thing about just even though Paul Maurice was never in danger of losing his job, even after one loss, he knows that he could joke about it. And one anonymous player talked about just his overall confidence when going into those meetings and saying, and one said, quote, those interviews during the playoffs, hard not to like them there. As far as coaches that the players would least like to play for, John Tortorella is up there, but it's funny because he's also towards the middle of players who say they want to play for him. So it's a lot of mixed reviews. John Tortorella overwhelmingly got a huge amount of votes. And Jeff Merrick talks about this quite often on his show, The Sheet, about the story of Jay Feaster, of bringing in Vincent Lecavalier and John Tortorella into his office and saying, I'm not firing you. I'm not trading you. You guys figure it out. And now looking back at the whole situation in Vancouver with JT Miller getting traded to the New York Rangers, you wonder if Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford should have gone that direction because of the fact that JT Miller brings so much of that sandpaper, leadership, grit, and the fact that that's maybe something that the Vancouver Canucks need in their lineup. And apparently the breakup for that all happened during their trip to Florida during the beginning of the season. That was mid-October when that happened. So their trip to Florida was when things really started to fall apart. At least that's what the rumors are saying about that whole breakup. And John Tortorella, going back to them, we've seen what everything that's gone on the ice as far as where guys like Cam York stands. Morgan Frost, before he was traded, about just the scratches there. Sean Couturier getting scratched recently after getting named captain. Other guys that were up there, Mike Babcock, who was recently fired by the Columbus Blue Jackets right before even coaching a game based on taking their cell phone and going through it, which is kind of weird. Greg Cronin, we recently had Doug Stohan on the show to discuss everything about Greg Cronin and the Anaheim Ducks, about just a lot of guys not wanting to play for him. I mean, Ilya Mikheyev spoke publicly after his time in Anaheim, and Bruce Cassidy was weirdly up there for the, not weirdly, but it's not. But after winning a Stanley Cup, you'd think that more people would want to play for him. But also Scotty Bowman, when he's not on this list, but Scotty Bowman was a guy that a lot of guys despised most of the year, and then when you win the Stanley Cup, you saw that it was worth it, about going through the whole year of trying to win the cup and then eventually it paying off. But Scotty Bowman was a guy that was hated a lot during his coaching days there. So listen, tough love isn't necessarily always a bad thing for these players here. And going back to Bruce Cassidy, I mean, let's also not forget that the relationship between him and Jake DeBrusk, they were not able to get along there, and both are no longer in Boston. So good to see that they had their breakup and they're both thriving in their new places, as the Boston Bruins are definitely missing Jake DeBrusk's secondary scoring. Lindy Ruff is also up there, which there are a multitude of issues in Buffalo. Stephen Nason takes a run at Tage Thompson on Sunday. They don't fight back. And then the very next day, their very next game against the Columbus Blue Jackets, Alexander Texier is in the starting lineup for Columbus, a guy who is one of those enforcers and one guy who's not afraid to drop the gloves. And then from the start of the puck drop, the Buffalo Sabres get in a brawl with him, and just as a response after a players only meeting for no one standing up for Tage Thompson. So that doesn't change the reputation around the Sabres, and just thinking, why didn't you do that when Stephen Nason took a run at Tage Thompson there? And the Devils and the Buffalo Sabres don't play again until next season. So lots of issues in Buffalo. To think, I wonder if Dylan Cousins ends up getting traded for an Elias Pettersson. I just wonder what will happen to Cousins, as Kevin Adams has been burned so many times on trades of other guys thriving outside of Buffalo. And who says no to a trade? I would say that the Buffalo Sabres do, because you're taking on Elias Pettersson, and over the last year of him getting a contract extension, he hasn't really lived up to it as well. So that's another issue there. Best facilities: Detroit, Seattle, Edmonton, Vegas, some of the newer ones. No votes for the Panthers for best nor worst facilities. So So that is also a great news for the Panthers, and also the Red Wings give access to their NBA facilities too. So that's another thing. Carolina, even though they've done renovations to their away facilities, it's still the worst by a country mile. Locker rooms are cramped. Warm-up areas are in a storing area. So that's another thing that Carolina have made that a lot of improvements, but still among some of the worst in that. So this survey also, once again, represents that the Panthers are in great standing in the NHL, and the fact that they combine that with winning is going to continue to recruit more free agents and also guys with no trade clauses that will likely flip them to Florida and control their way there. In-season tournament, 55% of guys said no. They already play for the hardest trophy in sports, and there's already going to be mid-season international tournaments if this trend continues. Every 2 years that the NHL is going to conduct this. Other ones are, is the NHL season too long? 58% say no. You get out of conference games twice for the schedule, and also you play your division 4 times and out of division in the Eastern Conference, at least for the Panthers, 3 times. So I think it's a truly balanced schedule, at least in my opinion. Even though the NHL does want to go to 84 games, which will make 2 more division games, because in your division there's 2 teams that you play 3 times while the rest you play 4. So that's another scheduling balance that would be a lot better if the schedule did go to 84 games. But in the next segment, we are going to discuss more about the 4 nations coming up. Are players going to, in fact, take it easy with all the bodies going down? We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. And looking for tickets for the next big event, whether it's a concert, comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime picks, the app does all the work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. The best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Segment number 2 here on this Thursday, February 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So we are 6 days away from the 4 Nations tournament, and we are exactly 1 year away from the Winter Olympics in Milano Cortina in Italy. And there's so many questions coming into this tournament with what's going to happen with the intensity and also with the amount of injuries that are starting to pile up across the NHL, which Canada, right just before recording, said that they are going to name the Alex Pietrangelo replacement on Monday. So we'll know by then. So they have until a few days before the first game to name their replacements, which, once again, I think it should be Mackenzie Weegar, but I might have my individual biases there. Drew Doughty's trying to make a push there, but it should be earned. The guy who's played the more games should get the nod over the guy who hasn't played all season. But also the Olympics, the rosters are 25, so there's still a chance for Drew Doughty to make the Olympic team, which honestly means more to the players, if I'm being honest. So are the players going to take it easy? So I'm going to discuss this more in relation to the most recent Olympics that the NHL went to, because that's the one that I've experienced recently. So we've seen John Tavares go down in the 2014 Olympics, Steven Stamkos before, Alexander Barkov for Finland, Sean Bergenheim, and even for Slovakia, Thomas Kopecky in 2014. So 3 Panthers went down in that same tournament for the Panthers at that time. And on the Winter Olympics side in 2022, Brianna Decker, a notable injury in Beijing for the USA women's team there. And even in 2006, this one was noted at the time. Dominik Hasek never played a game for the Sens again after getting hurt in the Olympics there. So seeing Alex Pietrangelo go down, Miro Heiskanen is month to month after getting surgery for him after that knee-on-knee collision with him and Mark Stone, which Finland, on paper, they're starting to get even thinner. Their roster is already mostly of depth players, guys who play on the third and fourth line on their forwards, and now bodies are starting to go down for this tournament. So on paper, it's not really looking good for Team Finland for the Four Nations. Quinn Hughes didn't play in their most recent game, so he might not give it a go. Rick Taka even spoke publicly about them considering everything after Tuesday and going prior to the break. So, and in my opinion, if you're not healthy enough to play for your actual club, you shouldn't be playing in the Four Nations tournament. In my opinion, it's a little selfish for a player if they were to skip games for their club, but go for the actual international tournament. Mitch Marner recently missed his most recent game for the Leafs against the Calgary Flames on Tuesday, which William Nylander, a hat trick, which it's funny because his most recent hat trick was on the same exact day just a few years ago for him. So happened it's crazy how that happens. Sidney Crosby missed practice the other day after going out of a game recently for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So a lot of bodies are banged up going into this tournament, and it begs the question, are the players actually going to take it easy for this? And based what history says, when seeing one country versus another, it's going to be a no, that the players are not going to take it easy. That player, if you think that you are going to go into a game and getting hurt, more than likely you are going to. So the mental side of the game for these players, the players have to go in and play it like you would a regular game for them. So that is the mental side of things. And listen, and the length of things that players go through in order to continue playing. Like, for example, James Van Riemsdyk just the other day had to get stitches on his mouth and and lost a couple of teeth and had to wear a bubble, came back in the game and got a game time assist for them, and then had to get it fixed again after the game. And just overall hockey tough when it comes to James Van Riemsdyk there for him. And that's the lengths that players will go through for him. So I hope that guys like Sidney Crosby don't miss the tournament for the Four Nations, because every time that he's been in a tournament, he's been a star there, even though he's on the little bit of the older side for him. All the current Panthers are healthy, knock on wood, going into the game. And something that they discussed on the NHL Squad Show, which is on our Locked On Florida Panthers feed if you do want to watch it. Unfortunately, I'm not on that one, but I'm going to try to make the other squad shows coming up. It's good to have different voices here on the Locked On NHL Network. So get some perspectives outside of mine here on this network. So they discussed on the squad show about accessibility to tickets, but one thing that was not discussed there is how convenient it is during the schedule of the sports calendar, how the Super Bowl will be over. It's during the NBA All-Star weekend, and their events for the NBA are going to happen on Friday and Sunday. So the Four Nations is going to be in between all that. So the NHL is going to be on the spotlight especially on the Saturday, where we'll see Finland, Sweden, and Canada, USA in the primetime slot. Which, man, appointment television, please cancel your plans if you are able to. Call out of work if you want to watch the not only the countries go against each other in big rivalries, which we've already seen Victor Hedman and Patrick Laine chirp back and forth through the media about the Four Nations. So there's a lot of passion here, even though it's an NHL sanctioned event instead of something in relation to the IIHF here. So the spotlight is on the NHL here. So that, once again, we Nick Fairbanks and I discussed about where on the calendar that it should go, about preseason versus during the season. But now you're thinking about, once again, health perspective, you do it at the beginning. But if you're talking about maximizing dollars and viewership, February is in fact the time to do it. And speaking of hockey in Canada, new Miami Heat forward Andrew Wiggins is Canadian, so I maybe we see him at future Panther games. Who knows there? So maybe that's something that we see there. So that and also discussed on the squad show is it because tickets are so expensive. They want to see more teams actually host watch parties for the event, but in my opinion, I feel the NHL would hate that because they want people to travel outside, the fans who are outside of Boston and Montreal, to actually fly in and see the games themselves. Thankfully for us, for the Panthers, we have every reason to watch. 8 guys going to the event. And for me, selfishly, as a content creator, I'm counting my lucky stars that I won't be scrambling to create content when a lot of the other hosts on this network who might have 1 or 2 guys going to the tournament, that they might have to create something for what will their team do next once the Four Nations is over. But I would like to see what the Baptist Health Iceplex in Fort Lauderdale does for something related to the Four Nations. I don't think it'll be a Florida Panthers event from the actual organization, but I'm interested to see what the buzz will be like as fans will be going in for their dinner, their beer league hockey times, and then hanging out at the Federal even before or after their games to see like what the buzz will be like for seeing their players on the team. And listen, the Panthers coming off a Stanley Cup run for them, I think this will be beneficial for, once again, the growth of the game in South Florida here in relation to seeing their own guys, because let's be honest, it's less of an incentive for fans in each NHL market that's not necessarily a quote unquote hockey market, that they're less likely to watch a tournament if they don't have players from their team in it. It's less likely. You'll always have your diehards that will go and watch these games, but for those who are still trying, at least in this region, if the Panthers didn't come off a run and didn't have as many guys, you would see viewership from this area not be as strong. And I think the viewership for the area, in my opinion, will be strong. Maybe that's me being overly optimistic, but we're gonna have to see there after once the tournament is over. So very excited once again. It's crazy to think we've been discussing this for over almost a year now, and it's finally coming true. 6 days away, so cannot wait for that. But in the third and final segment, we are going to preview tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the St. Louis Blues, as the two teams will take the ice tonight at the Enterprise Center. We are going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Third and final segment here on this Thursday, February 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So the Florida Panthers take on the St. Louis Blues tonight. The Panthers are 3-2-2 in their last 7 matchups against the Blues. Sandwiched into that is a 4-game losing streak for the Panthers against the Blues. And we spoke about it on the last show. Matthew Tkachuk had a natural hat trick his last time in St. Louis, in the place that he was raised. And crazy to think, this weekend, Super Bowl weekend, it's also the same weekend as the Waste Management Phoenix Open, which is played at TPC Scottsdale, which is Matthew Tkachuk's the place that he was born, but mostly raised in St. Louis. So a little bit of that connection this week for Matthew Tkachuk and himself there. Last time these two faced off against each other, Barkov was the guy who took over the game, drew the penalty, and then got the game-winning goal, being on the ice for over 2 minutes for the Panthers. And we've seen the chippiness for the Florida Panthers and the St. Louis Blues recently, especially in their last matchup, with how chippy it got after Sam Bennett laid a hit on Jake Neighbors, and then Justin Falk was not a fan of it and went after him after the next whistle. We do have some lines from Morning Skate today, as Jameson Olive of FloridaPanthers.com just recently tweeted this 5 minutes ago. We are timestamping this. It's 12:44 p.m. Eastern time, and Jameson Olive tweeted this 5 minutes ago. So lines are looking to be mostly the same. But Mackie Semiskevich is back on the second line with Bennett and Kachuk. Jesper Boquist is back down to the fourth line. So it looks like that Joe Nagajevic is going to be the scratch tonight for the Florida Panthers. So he played the last 3 games and scored a goal. So once again, credit to Joe Nagajevic in his ability to stay ready for him, and just how much the team loved it around him for him getting that goal after struggling so much with injury for him. But the St. Louis Blues, going back to them, slowly but surely, Doug Armstrong is getting out of cap jail for the Blues. As 3 guys on their defense, we spoke about the amount of clauses over the last few years. Now, this offseason, they're going from no move clauses to modified no trades, which are Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, and Nick Leddy, even though Torrey Krug is not playing this season, and his career might be over, actually, based on the offseason rumors, based on how bad the injury is currently for him. And getting cap relief from the mutual termination of Brandon Saad, whose contract didn't expire this offseason, now playing with a contender with the Vegas Golden Knights. So maybe this is the year that the offseason that St. Louis makes the splash trade in the offseason for them. So still somewhat in contention in the Western Conference, though they're not necessarily they're not determined at this moment to necessarily make a trade. So they're still 6 points out of the final wild card spot. They are 4-5-1 in their last 10 games. So they are starting to put things together to make the transition a lot smoother, because they still have quite a few contracts from their Stanley Cup run. One of them being Colton Parayko is another one for them. So, but I think about this. I mentioned the clauses changing from no move to modified no trade. Think about this. The St. Louis Blues won the Cup in 2019. Most of the clauses that come off for the defense are 6 years after the Blues won the Cup. The Florida Panthers won the Cup in 2024. What year are most of the clauses coming off for the Panthers and most expiring contracts for them? 2030, 6 years after winning the Cup. So when it comes to maximizing a window and showing and the trends of what a window front offices think they're in, even though the St. Louis Blues, unfortunately for them, lost Alex Pietrangelo, and he went on to win another Stanley Cup for him. It just goes to show like what teams are kind of looking for as far as trying to build throughout a core over a certain period of time, so which the Panthers are continuing to try to do, but still got to make a multitude of decisions coming up for them. So as far as the gameplay for the Blues, struggled to score, but Dylan Holloway, who they offer sheeted this offseason, doubled the amount of points that he's had over the last 2 years in Edmonton, only his 3rd season in the NHL. Time on ice for him is 6 more minutes that he did in Edmonton. So he's a player that's not blocked by Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Zach Hyman. So he's not blocked for them. So he's personally thriving for the St. Louis Blues for them. So it looks like to be a pretty good gamble by Doug Armstrong. But again, nobody on the St. Louis Blues team is a point per game. They're in 20s in most offensive categories for the Panthers. And we discussed this last go round for the St. Louis Blues is the speed of Jordan Kyrou, the playmaking of Robert Thomas, Pavel Buchnevich. It seems as if he always gets in on the scoring against the Florida Panthers. He performs well, 12 points in 14 games. But it's been a little bit of a down year for Jordan Binnington, 899 save percentage. But this is with the St. Louis Blues being in the middle of the pack in shots against per game. They're towards the bottom 5 in shots for. So this is encouraging for the Florida Panthers, especially coming off their game against the Washington Capitals, which we saw a multitude of occasions on Tuesday night of them just denying the speed of the Caps coming through the neutral zone. So this looks like a matchup, a get-right kind of game for the Panthers. So I'm interested to see how the Panthers will lock it up defensively. So I expect them to play a little bit inspired, especially because things broke for the Panthers as far as the speed of the Washington Capitals getting behind their D and then the amount of breakaways against that they had. So I am hoping that for the Panthers that the breakaway opportunities will be limited, at the Panthers can protect the puck better at their blue line. So we will see about that after the Panthers didn't play the worst game on Tuesday night, but just the fact that the bottom six for the Washington Capitals was just more opportunistic for them. So we'll see how the Panthers do that against a team that's still not necessarily out of it, but still in a position to possibly make a run, which the Panthers are once again. This is after tonight, only one more game in outside of the Eastern time zone, which will come February 25th in Nashville. So after that, the Panthers will have one of the easier travels for remaining of the season. They got their, at this point of the season, in pretty good standing in the Eastern Conference, and the fact that the travel is going to get easier for them, pretty decent spot to be for the Cats. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Make sure to come back for tomorrow's edition of the show. We will recap the Panthers' game against the St. Louis Blues from the Enterprise Center. Make sure to come back tomorrow as we will discuss that and more. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.